Did you know that addressing underperformance could actually strengthen your relationship with your team? Most managers dread underperformance conversations because they fear damaging relationships, but avoiding them only makes things worse. The truth is, done right, these conversations can actually strengthen trust, and I'm going to show you how. In this video, I'll show you a simple coaching framework to turn underperformance around without the awkwardness that makes most of us want to avoid these conversations altogether. I'm going to cover 3 critical things. First, why most performance conversations feel so awkward and the simple mindset shift that changes everything. Second, a step-by-step coaching framework that will guide your conversation smoothly. And third, what to do if coaching doesn't work, because sometimes it just doesn't. And if you stay with me to the end, I'll share the single biggest mistake I see managers make when trying to fix underperformance. And it's probably not what you think. And fixing that alone can transform your effectiveness as a leader. Plus, to help you put all this into practice, there is a coaching guide linked below for you to use. Now, let's start with the biggest challenge when it comes to addressing poor performance. Why these conversations can feel so uncomfortable in the first place. So the first reason is timing. Most managers wait too long to address the issues. Yeah, you notice something is a bit off in February. We use the cross-finger approach of management and hope it just improves on its own. And then suddenly it's May and this problem has just got bigger. But by then it feels like a big confrontation rather than a simple course correction. The second reason is approach. Many managers go in with judgment rather than curiosity. And when you start from the position that someone has got it wrong, they immediately feel that they need to defend themselves. The third reason, your team members often get defensive because they feel criticised rather than supported. They sense that you're there to point out their flaws and not help them succeed. Now, this is often unintentional because there's a maelstrom of emotions going on. You may be a bit nervous, they may be a bit defensive, and before you know it, it just all goes wrong and feels completely awkward. The fix for all of these is surprisingly simple, and it's to shift from a performance review mindset or I've got to give feedback mindset to a coaching mindset. Think of it this way. A performance review looks backwards at what went wrong. Coaching looks forwards at how can we succeed. So a performance review feels like a judgment and coaching feels like working together to get better at something. And when you make this shift, the entire dynamic changes. You're no longer the critic, you're an ally on their side, helping them navigate whatever obstacles they're facing. And who doesn't want someone on their side at work? So the first thing you need to do is shift your mindset to be a coach. But then what? Now, this is where this 4-step framework comes in and makes these conversations both effective and easier to do. So step 1 is all about observing and preparing. Before the conversation even begins, you need to do your homework. You need to gather specific examples of the underperformance. Get clear in your own mind, not vague impressions, but concrete instances of what has happened. Let me give you an example. A manager I coached had a team member who was always missing deadlines. They were completely frustrated by them. What we started to do was track specifics. The client proposal was late on February the 3rd. The budget submission was late on February the 15th. Once we had the data, the conversation became much more factual. The emotions dissipated, and that changed everything. Focus on patterns, not one-off mistakes that anyone could make, and consider context. Is this new behavior? Is everyone struggling in this area, or is it just this person? Once you know what the issue is, you need to be curious. And this is where most managers go wrong. They launch straight into telling the employee what's wrong. I'm going to give you a much better technique. Instead, start with an observation followed by a genuine question. So instead of you're not meeting expectations on deadlines, try I've noticed the last 3 client deliverables came in after the deadline. What happened here? Then, and this is crucial, let them speak first. Research shows that people are far more likely to own a problem when they articulate it for themselves rather than having it pointed out to them. So listen carefully to their perspective. Are they aware of the issue? Do they see it differently? Do they have insights on the reasons why this has happened? And do you think it's an issue of skill? They don't know how to do something well, or will, their attitude and their motivation? Once you have a common view of the situation, the next step is to guide, not dictate and tell them what to do. We're going to use the GROW model, and this stands for goal. So what is good in this situation? What is it that you're trying to achieve? Reality, this is where is the person right now, and what is the gap between where they are and where they want to be and you want to be. Options, what are the options or choices that the person could take in order to help them achieve the goal from where they are now? And then finally, will. And this is all about action and commitment. Let me show you how this works in practice. So let's go back to the example of missing deadlines. For goal, you could ask, what does success look like in meeting deadlines? What standard would make both you and me feel confident about your work in this area? For reality, you can explore by asking, what's getting in the way of meeting these deadlines? Are there any specific challenges that you're facing? For options, work together to come up with a plan. So you could ask, what are some of the ways you could approach this differently? What resources or support might help? And you can also add in your own suggestions. Say something like, I wonder if breaking projects into smaller milestones might help. And finally, will. Establish commitments, where you would ask, of these options, which specific actions are you going to take this week? How will we know this is working? This approach transforms conversations from criticism to collaboration. You're not telling them what to do, you're helping them to come up with their own solution. It's such a shift in the dynamic. It works so well. And all you need to do is ask questions and summarize and guide the conversation. Now, the conversation isn't the end, it's the beginning. End by establishing very clear follow-up. So that might sound like, let's check in on how this is going next Friday. What specific progress would you like to show me by then? And this ensures that they take ownership while keeping your relationship strong. It also signals that you're invested in their success, not just pointing out failures. Now, let's be realistic. Sometimes coaching doesn't produce the improvement you were looking for. And when that happens, it's time to shift gears. If you've had multiple coaching conversations with little improvement, move to clearer expectations and consequences. Now, that's going to sound like we've discussed the deadline issue several times now, but I'm not seeing the improvement we talked about. I need to be more direct. Meeting project deadlines is a non-negotiable part of your role. Let's set a clear 30-day action plan with specific milestones. Document this conversation and the specific improvements needed, and be clear about the timeline and the consequences if improvement doesn't happen. If needed, at this point, it may be where you involve HR or implement a formal performance improvement plan, a PIP. But remember, by following the coaching framework first, you've given them every opportunity to succeed on their own terms. And that matters both for the relationship, for your confidence, and for the potential legal considerations further down the road. And here's something important. If you've truly followed the coaching approach and still don't see an improvement, the issue might be a fundamental misalignment between the person and the role. For a person to succeed in a role, I think there are 3 dimensions to think about. The role, so what is needed to be done. The person, which includes their skills, their knowledge, and their behaviors as they do the role. And then finally, there's this fit. And this can be more difficult to quantify, but sometimes a person just doesn't fit the role. They don't get energy from it, they don't enjoy it. And in these cases, sometimes the kindest thing for everyone is to help them find a position better suited to their strengths, either within your organisation or elsewhere. What is amazing about this coaching approach is that often this just comes out as you explore the situation. I for sure have had team members say, I just don't really like doing this role and I need to find something that fits me better. And I've helped them do just that. Most managers struggle with difficult conversations, not just underperformance, but feedback, motivation, and development. And that's why I created the free coaching guide, which covers all of these scenarios, and you can download it below. I said earlier that I would share the single biggest mistake managers make when dealing with underperformance. Well, it is they wait too long. Small issues become big problems. Feedback that would have been easy and a quick course correction becomes a major intervention. But when I dig deeper, the reason that this is happening is that managers are not giving themselves time to think and plan about their team. They are spending too much time being reactive to events and not enough time getting on the front foot. In other words, they don't have a strong system for how they manage and lead. So they don't think about these issues until it is often too late. And they don't create the moments with their team where these conversations would be so much easier, like, for example, having consistent one-on-ones. Coaching isn't about fixing problems, it's about unlocking potential. And that's what leadership really is all about. And coaching is just one piece of leading the high-performing team. But unless you fix that area of planning and thinking and getting ahead, and that you will always be more reactive. So watch this video next where I break down the management system every successful leader needs. And it's the perfect next step in developing your leadership toolkit.